Amy and I hadn't spoken in almost 5 weeks. After the last round of fertility treatment failed, she stopped answering my texts. We'd broken up quietly, the kind of breakup that doesn't involve screaming or tears, just a slow drift into silence. I didn't expect to see her again. Not like this. She showed up at my door around 10 p.m. I was still in my work clothes, sitting on the couch, half watching a movie. She was holding something in a blanket. I opened the door and froze. She didn't say hello, just stared at me and said, "His name is Caleb. I need you to meet him." She was holding a baby. "Amy, whose baby is that?" She said it was our baby, that I finally became a father. While she was talking, I realized that wasn't a baby. It was a newborn doll, one of those ultra-realistic fake babies. I told her it wasn't a good time. She stepped forward anyway. I moved to block the doorway, but she looked me in the eyes and said, "If you close this door, I will end it all tonight, and it's going to be your fault. Do you understand me?" Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't blink. I stepped aside. She walked in like she lived there. Didn't even ask. Just went straight to the couch and sat down, cradling the doll. I didn't know what to say. I asked if she was okay. She smiled at the doll and said, "We're adjusting. He cries a lot, but that's normal for a newborn." Then she looked at me like I was supposed to agree. I didn't. She started talking fast about his feeding schedule, how she had to wake up every 2 hours, how Caleb liked white noise when he slept. She said she'd driven around the block 5 times because he wouldn't calm down in the car seat. I stood there frozen, trying to piece together what I was supposed to do. I offered her water, thinking she'd eventually leave once she calmed down. But she wasn't calming down. She stood up suddenly and said, "He needs his crib. I brought it. It's in the car." I said no. I told her this wasn't her home anymore, and I wasn't going to let her treat it like it was. Her face went blank. She sat back down slowly and whispered, "Then I guess we'll sleep here on the floor." There was this moment where I thought maybe I could reason with her. I sat across from her and tried to talk about what happened to us, how hard things had gotten, how losing the pregnancy broke both of us. She didn't want to hear it. She kept rocking the doll, not even blinking. I told her I thought she needed help, that maybe this baby, this thing wasn't the answer. She looked up at me and her voice got sharp. "Don't call him that. He's mine. I carried him. I dreamed about him. I know what his cries sound like." She pulled the doll closer and turned away like I was the threat. I asked her to leave again. She didn't move. Then she said, "I didn't come here to fight. I came here because you're his father too, and you need to step up." Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, but rage. Her voice cracked and she repeated, "You left. You gave up. I didn't." I told her I didn't give up. I just couldn't live like that anymore, that we were destroying each other. She stood up. The doll's head bounced slightly as she moved. She didn't care. I walked toward the door, told her I was calling someone to come get her. She blocked me. Her free hand grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "He's sleeping. Don't raise your voice." I tried to pull away. She dropped the doll on the couch, lunged for my phone. We struggled, pushing against each other. She got her hands on it and threw it across the room. I shoved her off me and told her this was insane. She screamed, not like someone in pain, like someone being ripped apart. "I lost everything, and now you want to take this too? You want to kill him, don't you?" I tried to calm her down, but she rushed into the kitchen, opened the drawer, pulled out the biggest knife I owned. I backed up with both hands raised, told her I wasn't going to touch her. She wasn't listening. Her whole body was shaking. "If I can't have him, no one will. You hear me? No one. I'll carve him out if I have to." She was crying now, but the knife stayed up. I tried to grab a chair between us. She moved fast, swung once, missed. I grabbed her wrist with both hands and slammed it into the wall. The knife dropped. I kicked it away and shoved her back onto the floor. She sat there, sobbing, cradling her wrist, the doll crumpled next to her like laundry. I picked up the phone, screen cracked, but working, and called 911. She didn't try to stop me. She just whispered to the doll over and over again. "I protected you. I protected you." The dispatcher asked me if anyone was injured. I told them no, just disturbed, mentally unstable. They told me to wait outside, so I grabbed my keys and locked myself in the car. I sat there watching the window. She didn't come out. 15 minutes later, the cops arrived. I let them in. Amy was still on the floor, curled up with the doll in her arms, rocking slowly. She didn't resist, didn't speak. They asked me what happened. I told them she forced her way in and wouldn't leave. She brought a fake baby and believed it was real. They nodded like they'd seen it before. They took her away without handcuffs, just guided her out slowly, arms loosely at her sides, the doll still pressed against her shoulder. She didn't look at me once. One of the officers asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no. I didn't even want to talk about it anymore. I just wanted the door closed. I stayed up all night cleaning up broken glass, wiping off the blood smudge on the wall, tossing the baby blanket in the trash. There was nothing wrong with the air. No ghosts, no whispers, just a quiet apartment and the sound of sirens fading out in the distance. 3 days later, I got a letter from the hospital. She'd been placed under psychiatric observation, diagnosed with acute postpartum psychosis, even though she'd never given birth. They said she might stay there for a long time. They said she asked about me, asked if Caleb missed her. I didn't write back. It was 2007, and my younger sister Nisa and I had spent the afternoon filming with our father's old camera. That day, Dad had brought an antique doll from an antique store on the outskirts of town. The doll was a huge rag doll. "We're filming." I stood in front of her with the doll in my arms, trying to hide the slight shiver it gave me. "This is Dalla. Dad bought it from a strange store. I think it's pretty interesting." My sister laughed and kept filming. She seemed to like the new doll. I was a little more uncomfortable, and it showed, but as the seconds passed, I was getting used to it. But suddenly, Dalla, the doll, moved her head. It wasn't a slight tremor or a weight drop. Her head slowly turned towards me, her lifeless eyes staring directly at me. It was real, so real that I felt the blood freeze in my veins. With a scream, I threw the doll to the ground. Nessa let out a shriek and her camera shook before falling. We ran into the kitchen, our hearts hammering in our ears. "Mom! Dad!" They both came running, worried by our screams. "The doll! It moved!" My mother frowned in disbelief as my father grabbed Nessa's phone. Together, they reviewed the video. The doll looked static, just like any other doll. Neither of them said anything for several seconds, but finally, my father murmured, "It must have been a joke, or, I don't know, maybe it's got a loose joint." They tried to calm us down, but I wasn't convinced. Neither was Nessa. Something else was going on. That night I tried to sleep, but I couldn't get the way Dalla had looked at me out of my head. We left the doll in the dining room as my parents had suggested, but neither of us wanted to touch it again. At 3 a.m, I was awakened by a sound. It was soft but unmistakable. Small footsteps, as if someone was walking around the house, but not heavy enough to be an adult. I got up quietly and walked to my bedroom door. Nessa was already there, standing in the hallway, motionless. I walked over to the railing overlooking the dining room and looked down. The doll was not where we had left her. We tried to be brave like Mom and Dad told us, but when we went downstairs, the dining room chairs were in disarray, as if someone had dragged them. Dalla, the doll, was sitting in one of them, cross-legged, leaning slightly forward as if she was waiting for us. We took the doll back to the dump that same morning, unseen by Mom and Dad. We thought we were out of trouble, but in the middle of that night, the smell of something rotten woke me up. When I turned on the night lamp, I saw her. There, lying next to me, was the doll, covered in debris and dirt. I was about to move when I saw the worst. The doll's eyes blinked. Not only did they move, but they moved as if something was controlling them from within. Her head slowly turned towards me. I jumped off the bed as soon as I regained control of my body and ran to the door. I turned the handle with all my might, but when I turned to look at the bed, Dala was no longer lying down. She was now sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at me in terror. "Watch out!" Nessa's voice snapped me out of my stupor. I looked up just in time to dodge a piece of the ceiling that came loose, falling where I had been. I ran for the door. Nessa was already there, and we both threw ourselves into our parents' arms in desperation. My parents finally understood that something wasn't right, though they didn't want to admit it. My father entered the room without a word, took the doll, and put it in a cardboard box, tightening the lid as if it would contain whatever was possessing it. He did not speak to us as he did all this, nor did he look at Nessa and me when he loaded the box into his car the next day. The antique store where he had bought it was about 2 hours from home. He didn't say anything about it, just drove off and didn't come back until the afternoon. I never asked what he did with the doll, and he didn't offer any details either. But at that point, I thought it was all over. 2 weeks passed without incident. Everything seemed normal. But one day, while cleaning under Nessa's bed, I found a piece of dirty fabric. It was the same type of fabric as Dala's dress. I left it in its place and walked away, trying not to scare Nessa with what I had found. That night, the sound of childish laughter woke me up. They were as if someone was playing in the hallway. I got out of bed, thinking maybe Nessa was dreaming or playing a joke, but when I opened the door, I realized it wasn't her. She was standing at the end of the hallway, motionless, pale. That night, everything we feared finally unraveled. Dala was in the living room, sitting in the middle of the floor, exactly where we had left her before Dad took her to the store. It wasn't possible. The doll was supposed to be out of our lives. But there she was in her dirty dress, covered in debris, her black eyes glittering as if she enjoyed our panic. My feet were unresponsive. I felt like the house was breathing with us, as if something invisible was surrounding us. No, it can't be. Suddenly, someone grabbed my arm. It was Nessa, who was trembling, but without taking her eyes off my wrist. Then it happened. The lights flickered for a second, and we heard that sound. The same light footsteps we had heard the previous night. Only this time, they were faster, closer. The sound of something small running around the house, but we couldn't see what it was. The windows were closed, the doors locked, but it felt like something was moving, something that wasn't human. Nessa began to cry quietly, and I knew we couldn't stay there. I slowly approached the doll, and when I was only a few steps away from her, the floor creaked beneath my feet. Dala's eyes flickered again, and her head tilted to the side as if she were trying to hear something. Before I could react, I felt the air around me shift as if someone invisible was running beside me. A whisper, a low chuckle directly in my ear. I screamed, grabbed Nessa, and we ran out of the room. We ran to safety, hiding, hugging, and crying. Then I felt Nisa's skin feel different, like a familiar feeling I had already felt. I looked down and realized that wasn't Nessa. That was the doll, again turning her head towards me. I was locked in with her. The doll moved her arm around and grabbed my face. I was completely immobilized. I started to run out of air, and the doll started to laugh nonstop. I was about to lose consciousness. And then I woke up. I was sweating on the bed, crying. Nessa came over to me, trembling. At first, I thought she was worried about me until I realized that she hadn't even realized anything had happened to me. She had woken up at the same time I did, and when she told me her dream, it was identical to mine. That was the last time we dreamed about the doll. We still don't understand why we had that dream, but I don't think it was a coincidence. That was the doll saying goodbye in a perverse and sick way, giving us one last scare. I still see the video of the doll watching herself, and I shudder. It's been a while, and I still remember it. That day, we were so happy and so innocent. I had no idea what I had in my hands.
Family is supposed to be the safest place in the world, right? But what if your own family is not what you think it is? What if the people in your family don't wish the best for you? I know you have heard a lot of stories from all around the world, but today I would like to take you to India and tell you about a real incident that my own family faced. In my family, it's just me, my brother, and my parents. I was just 15 back then, and my brother was even younger when my father started a new business and it took off. As a kid, I did not understand much about our financial condition. But one thing was evident: we were getting financially stable. In the next few years, we moved places and shifted into a bigger home, bought a new car, and I even transferred to a better private school along with my little brother. My dad's business had taken off and was performing better than expected, and our finances had improved exponentially. My parents had even saved money to send me abroad for my education once I was out of high school. But one thing that had started since Dad started earning more money was our relatives always asking for monetary help, without any promise or plan of returning the money. At first, my parents did not mind helping them out, but soon they noticed a pattern and started making excuses to not hand out free help. Some family members accepted the rejection and stopped asking, but some took it with a pinch of salt. It all began when one evening my father returned looking upset and defeated. One of his major clients had dropped him without any explanation before the expiry of their contract. This meant a huge loss to my dad's business. But somehow my brother, my mom, and I managed to cheer him up and tell him that all these things are common in business. But things just started to decline from there. Dad lost one more of his huge clients and my brother became ill. One evening he was a happy kid playing in our yard, and the next he was coughing blood and admitted to a hospital. Mother was stretched thin between home and the hospital. Her health too started taking a hit from overworking herself. I helped whenever I could, but my grades started declining as a result of an imbalanced home life. Months passed and neither did my dad's business recover, nor did my brother. Doctors could not diagnose what was wrong with him as all the test results were normal, but still my brother could not get out of bed. Finally, when no treatment worked, my parents decided to bring him back home, hoping a familiar environment would help him heal. When my mother could no longer manage everything, she called her mother over for some days. My grandma was a spiritual woman. She could sense energies and auras. So when she entered our home, she was immediately drawn toward my little brother's room. The door was closed as he was sleeping, but when we stood in front of his room, we could hear him talking to someone. Only bits and pieces of his conversation were audible, but along with his, there was another distinct voice in the room. We thought that maybe he was talking to Dad on the phone, but when we all entered his room, he was lying on his bed with an unfamiliar doll in his hands. "Who are you talking to, son?" my mother asked him, and he smiled and lifted the doll. It looked like a small teddy bear wearing clothes. Nothing out of the ordinary. But my mother looked skeptical and my grandma's face had an unreadable expression. For some reason, my grandma did not let my mom inquire any further. We all walked out of his room and my grandma looked gravely concerned. "Where did you buy this doll from?" she asked my mother. "I don't know. I don't remember purchasing it," my mother replied. That night when I walked past my brother's room once again, I heard him talking to someone. But this time I heard every word they were saying. "I can't come with you to play. I love my family and I want to live with them," my brother said. But what the unfamiliar voice replied had me on edge. The next morning I talked about it to my mom and my grandma. That voice said he would take Joe forcefully if he did not agree to come with him willingly. My mom had tears in her eyes, and realization flashed across my grandma's face. "I know this might sound weird, but I think someone has cast a black spell on your family," my grandma said, and I gasped. We had heard about black magic and its effects, but never had we dreamt that something like that could happen to our family too. My grandma slowly walked into my brother's room and sat beside him in his bed, patting his head. He woke up from his sleep, and she smiled at him, looking much paler and weaker than before. "That's a nice teddy bear. Where did you get it from?" she asked casually, trying to make a conversation. "Oh, you know Aunt Ginny, Dad's sister? One afternoon when Mom and Ginny were not home, she had visited with gifts. that's when she gave me this teddy bear to me. Isn't it so cute?" my brother chirped, showing off his toy. "Did she say anything while she gave it to you?" "Nope, just to play with it every day and to always keep it beside my bed. And do you know sometimes this doll talked to me as well?" my brother blurted out, but Grandma nodded solemnly and kissed him on his forehead as she walked away. That night when my brother was asleep, I snuck the teddy bear doll out of his room and gave it to Grandma. She placed a hand on my mother's shoulder and assured her that she would take care of it. The next day, she left with the teddy bear doll with her, and 2 days later, we heard the worst news of our life. Grandma had fallen down the stairs and was paralyzed completely, and beside her unconscious body lay the teddy bear. 3 days later in the afternoon, someone knocked on our door. My mother was busy in the kitchen, so I opened the door and there stood a man who looked like a priest wearing orange clothes and carrying a cloth bag. He asked for my mother and I let him in. Upon entering our home, he started looking around. When my mother met him, he introduced himself and told me that my grandma had contacted him regarding my brother. As usual, my brother was asleep, but when the priest entered his room following me and my mom, he immediately refused to step in. "There is something very wrong in this room," he exclaimed and asked my mother to immediately move my brother out of that room. He then purified our whole home by sprinkling holy water throughout our home and praying. Before he left, he told my mom that my grandma was right, someone had indeed done something. But not to our family, no. Someone had done something specifically to my brother. He also gave her a small idol of a god to place near my brother's bed and told my mother that on the coming weekend, he would perform a ritual to end the effect of the black magic. However, before the weekend could come, my brother's health took a turn for the worst. He was once again hospitalized for puking blood and screaming for the teddy bear. My mother contacted the priest once again while Dad and I looked after my brother. That night itself, the priest visited our home and performed the ritual. And what we discovered after that blew our minds. The priest revealed that my Aunt Ginny, who did not have a kid of her own, was jealous of my father's growing business and our happy family, while she struggled to pay bills and rent. But she was most envious of my brother. Having a boy child is considered very lucky in our society. She was childless for years, no fertility treatment worked, and so she was always treated like an outcast by her family. That's when she met a woman who promised that she would help her conceive a child through black magic. The only catch was that she had to sacrifice the soul of a young boy. My brother was the only little boy she had access to. So, in her desperation for a son, she and the evil lady made a doll that had an evil spirit in it. This spirit was sent to kill my brother and take his soul. This explained the other voice coming from my brother's room. The priest had somehow freed the evil spirit and saved my brother. He even destroyed the teddy bear doll in the ritual and saved my brother. So after that, my brother's health recovered, and months later, he was back to normal, playing like the little kid he was. But since that day, none of us ever accepted gifts from others, let alone a toy like a doll.
I never liked horror stories. I was never one to believe in ghosts or spirits. My YouTube channel was about urban exploration, and that was enough for me. Walking through abandoned buildings, ruined factories, or tunnels under the cities. That gave me enough adrenaline. But James, my adventure partner and best friend, always felt like we could take it to the next level. He was looking for something more, something that would make us stand out. It was his idea to visit La Isla de las Muñecas. When we arrived in Mexico City, the idea of exploring a place full of dolls in the middle of a canal didn't seem so appealing to me. I saw it as a cheap gimmick to attract views. But for James, it was anything but. He had done his homework and researched every legend, every story surrounding that damn island. To him, this wasn't just another site. It was the place where we could make history. Something big, and, well, I went along with it. After all, our channel depended on it. People love the macabre. The first day we arrived at the canals of Xochimilco, we were more impressed by the beauty of the place than the spooky atmosphere. There were flowers floating on the water, and everything seemed so peaceful. If I didn't know what was coming next, I might have enjoyed it. We took a trajinera, a typical boat of the area, and headed towards the island. The boatman who took us there didn't say a word during the ride, although every time we mentioned the island, his face hardened. We didn't think anything of it at the time. When we arrived, the first dolls greeted us hanging from the trees with their broken eyes and mutilated bodies. Julian Santa Anna, the man who created this whole place, had hung hundreds of them to protect himself from something only he understood. But those dolls only gave the place an air of abandonment and madness. We didn't believe the legends, of course, but there was something about the place that, though I wouldn't admit it in front of James, made me nervous. The island had an eerie silence as if it was waiting for something. James was the first to pull out the camera.
"This is going to be pure gold."
I nodded, though deep down I wasn't so convinced. We started walking around the island, commenting on what we were seeing for the video. Dolls were everywhere, hanging from the trees, nailed to the walls of an old hut, some even floating in the water, already half rotten. They seemed to have been there forever, trapped in time. We passed by what looked like Julian's old house. The wooden door creaked when we opened it, and inside there were more dolls. It was worse than I imagined. Dolls with no eyes, disfigured heads, some with spider webs covering their bodies. James couldn't have been more excited.
"This is perfect."
He started taking closer shots, whispering his script for the video as I watched the dolls out of the corner of my eye. Something about their expressions was unsettling. I couldn't say what, but there was something different about them. Suddenly, one of the dolls made a sound, a laugh. It was high-pitched, like that of an old toy, but clear enough to alert us. James and I looked at each other in silence. There must be some kind of mechanism. I tried to rationalize this as much as possible, but the sound was coming from several different directions. It wasn't just one doll. It was as if all the dolls had started laughing at the same time. I walked over to one of them, the one closest to the entrance, and examined it. It had no batteries. One of them seemed to be destroyed by time. There was no way it could work. "Did you hear that?" James just nodded. His initial enthusiasm was gone. Something wasn't right, but we didn't know what. The laughter stopped, but the silence that replaced it was much worse. James started walking toward the back of the cabin, filming as he went. I followed him, trying to keep calm. The place was small, but the number of dolls made it look like a maze. As we passed a corner, we both froze. There was a doll standing in the center of the room. It wasn't hanging. It wasn't leaning against anything. It was just standing there with its head cocked to one side as if it was looking at us. James was also in shock. The doll had no eyes, but its head was slowly turned toward us as if it could see us. James tried to touch it, but when he reached out his hand, the doll took a step forward. Neither of us said a word. We stepped back instinctively, colliding with the bookshelf that was behind us, and fell to the floor. The sound of the crash was the only thing that broke the silence. The dolls that were on the floor now seemed to all be looking in our direction. I don't know how to explain what happened, but it was as if this place was coming to life. "We have to get out of here, now!" We started walking back towards the exit, but I couldn't help but feel that something else was going on. And then we saw it. In front of us, a doll rose from the ground and began to float. The doll was rising, and its stiff little hands were moving unnaturally, but it wasn't levitating on its own. Something was lifting it. At first, we didn't understand. It was when we looked at it more closely that we could make it out. The doll was being held by a dark figure, barely visible in the gloom of the cabin. It wasn't the wind or a trick of the lights. It was the silhouette of a man. A man we recognized immediately from the photos we had researched before coming. It was Julian. James gasped as he recognized the figure. It wasn't just any shadow. Its form was tangible. It moved as if it was alive, but it wasn't a human being. Not anymore. It couldn't be. It was dead. Everyone knew that, and yet there it was, holding up that doll as it looked at us with no eyes, just a dark, defined shape. The doll began to laugh again, and we were terrified. The dolls began to move on their own, all of them. There was no way to ignore it anymore. Their laughter filled the cabin, and the air seemed to get colder. We ran to the door, but it wasn't open like before. There was something blocking it, as if the island itself wanted us to stay. James began banging on the door in desperation as I tried to stay calm. We knew we couldn't stay there. The dolls were getting closer. Each one of them moved their little bodies awkwardly, but steadily towards us. Julian's figure was still in the corner, unmoving, but his presence dominated everything. The dolls now surrounded us. We could smell the dust, the old plastic, the dampness that permeated the place. Their laughter was unbearable. The feeling of being trapped with something we didn't understand. It was suffocating. The window! We threw ourselves out the window, falling hard to the ground. I felt the pain run down my leg, but I couldn't stop. James fell next to me, groaning in pain as well, but we both knew we couldn't stay there. I looked up at the broken window, and there was Julian, watching us from above, stroking the hair of one of the dolls as if it was all a game to him. We ran without looking back. We didn't know where we were going. We just wanted to get away from that cursed place. We reached the shore, and the boatman who had taken us there was waiting for us. We didn't say a word. We just climbed into the boat, panting and bleeding. The boatman asked no questions. He knew what we had seen. We never spoke again about what happened on the island. When we returned home, James saved the camera footage, but didn't upload it. We didn't want anyone to see what we had recorded. No one would understand, and we didn't want more people to be attracted to the place. The island was a place that should be forgotten. We still have a part of the recording of that day, and I reviewed it to tell you this story. I regret having done so. It's like I went back to that place for just a few horrible seconds. When my grandmother died, I didn't think much about what was going to happen to her house. She was a lonely woman, the kind that people rarely visited. She lived in a small town in a house that seemed frozen in time. She always told me that dolls kept her company, and I, like everyone else, thought it was just one of those things old people said to make them feel less lonely. The house was full of them. Porcelain dolls. Dozens, maybe more than 100, were distributed throughout the house, with special attention in her room, where she placed them with obsessive care. When I moved out after the funeral home, there was no one else left to take care of the house. It was large and somewhat old, but it was well cared for. The dolls were part of that life, as if they had been silent witnesses to my grandmother's story. Strangely, they didn't bother me. I'd grown up watching them. To me, they were part of the furniture, like the pictures on the walls or the antique furniture. On my first night back in the house, I slept in my grandmother's room, surrounded by them. Although I knew many would find that uncomfortable, it didn't affect me. I didn't see anything strange about those dolls. They were simply objects, inert and fragile. I fell asleep without any problems. After a couple of days, I decided to do something for my grandmother's collection. It occurred to me that if I added a new doll, something of my taste, maybe I would feel more connected to the house. I went to an antique store in a nearby town and found an antique doll. She was small, porcelain, with brown hair and curls, and a blue dress. It didn't look like it had been cared for like my grandmother's, but I liked it. I took her away and placed her with the others. That same night, I decided to film the dolls. Something that entertained me as a kid was recording things with my camera, so I thought it would be interesting to make a video of my grandmother's collection. I filmed the whole room, focusing on each doll one by one. I was sure I could later edit it and make a little tribute. The next day, when I was reviewing the recording, I noticed something. The new doll. Something about her was wrong. At certain points in the video, her eyes were closed, and at others, they were open. And not only that, in some shots her arms were in different positions. I checked it again and again, trying to figure out if it was a flaw in the video or a simple confusion on my part, but the images were clear. The doll had changed. I decided to check it in person. I picked it up and inspected it, looking for some kind of mechanism or sign of manipulation. But there was nothing. It was just an old porcelain doll like the others. I thought for a while about what I had seen, but I couldn't explain it. So I put it back in its place along with the others. Although I slept that night, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Something about that new doll wasn't right. It was as if it was watching me. The next morning, I noticed something even stranger. The new doll was not where I had left it. The bed where I had placed it with the other dolls was empty. I started looking for it, thinking that maybe I had moved it without even realizing it. It was then that I heard something in the living room. The television was on, although I hadn't turned it on. I went to see what was going on, and there, sitting on the couch as if watching TV, was the doll. She was positioned in a strange posture, almost human, with her head slightly tilted towards the screen. I froze for a moment. I picked it up and carried it back into the room, making sure to put it back in its place. I was scared, but also intrigued. I decided I would take a closer look at it. I started filming her with my camera whenever I could, but she never seemed to move when I filmed her. While I found the other dolls almost comforting, the new one felt different. It was as if something about her was alive. Over the next few nights, the strange events continued. They started small, windows opening when I was sure I had closed them, doors moving slightly. Once I found the bed unturned, although I didn't remember getting up in the middle of the night. One day, coming into the kitchen, I found a broken glass on the floor. There was no way it could have fallen on its own. I looked around the house but found nothing out of the ordinary. When I returned to the living room, the new doll was on the couch again, this time facing the window. With each passing day, the doll appeared in different places, sometimes in the kitchen and the bathroom, but I never saw it move. I filmed her constantly. I was kind of obsessed. But whenever there were cameras, she remained motionless. Still, the strange occurrences kept happening, and I couldn't help but think it was all related to that damn doll. I wanted to catch the doll in the act, to see her move, to understand what was going on. So I started leaving the camera recording while I slept, pointing directly at her. But every morning when I checked the recordings, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was one particular night when things came to a head. I woke up screaming in pain. I felt a sharp pain in my foot as if something had hit me hard. I got up and saw my foot completely bent at an impossible angle. Near it, the hammer I used for repairs was lying on the floor, and right next to it was a doll. It wasn't the new doll. It was one of the old ones, one of the ones that had been in my grandmother's collection forever. I tried to process what had happened. I looked up, and what I saw took my breath away. All the dolls in the room were out of place, standing, lined up, looking directly at me. I struggled to my feet. The pain in my foot was excruciating. Then I saw a glare coming from the bathroom. Limping, I made my way there, and inside the bathroom I saw the new doll, engulfed in flames. The fire was reflected in the mirror where someone had scratched the words, "No new neighbors." As I turned around, all the dolls were staring at me as if they'd been watching me the whole time. Terror came over me as I realized what had been happening. The new doll had never done anything. It was all the other dolls. It was always them, trying in one way or another to get me to pull the new doll. When I didn't, they took care of the problem on their own. I ran out of that house as fast as I could, limping, not even able to put my foot down fully. I walked away filled with horror, never wanting to return. I was greeted at the hospital with a multiple fracture in my foot, and when they asked me what had happened, I just said it was an accident. There was no way anyone would believe the truth. It was days before I decided to go back for my things. When I returned, the house seemed quiet. The dolls were perfectly tidy as if nothing had happened. I gathered my belongings as quickly as I could and went to live with a friend. A few months later, I sold the house. The buyer was fascinated by the doll collection, as I left them as a gift to him. I have no idea what became of them, and I'd rather not know. I only know that since then, I've stayed away from any porcelain dolls, and I don't plan to change my mind anytime soon.